Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Sounds like the bad hold music with the Toxic by Britney Spears, but it's like really bad music.
Right.
So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews. On episode after the credits on End Credit Reviews, this is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Stephen Lawson.
From...
Actually, I'm just going to put it as that because Stephen Lawson Studios is currently possibly just being changed to Stephen Lawson. So you can check that on YouTube.
All right, and we have gotten our overdue review on Zack Snyder's Justice League. Just like how it's been long overdue to see the director's cut of this movie. So yeah, it's finally here in that. So before we get into the movie, we should, of course, give it a little bit of backstory. So basically, back in between 2016 and 2017, Zack Snyder was making his Justice League movie. However, the studio demanded reshoots sometime in 2017. After they saw how Wonder Woman was doing, they wanted the movie to be a little bit lighter in tone. But due to a personal family tragedy, Zack Snyder was not available to do the reshoot, so they hired another guy to come in to rewrite the movie, and they got Joss Whedon to come in to direct the movie, and now the movie's been jokingly referred to as Justice League. And ever since then, there has been a big growing fan base and movement to release the director's cut of the movie. And for a while, there were people saying like, oh, it doesn't exist and that. And I personally knew this existed because if you look at the director's cut of Batman v Superman, if you look at what Steppenwolf looks like in that movie, he looks like what he does in the Snyder cut, opposed to what we saw in the theatrical cut, where he's a lot different looking. At least he's a lot smaller in appearance. He's not intimidating looking whatsoever. And I knew that they wouldn't spend all this money on doing it, and it's unknown reason why they decided not to release it for a while. But then, of course, AT&T bought out Time Warner, and they want HBO Max to be up there with Netflix and Disney Plus, and they figured, hey, this would be a perfect opportunity to not just give the fans what they want, but to get people over to our streaming service to pump it out. And personally, I really like HBO Max a good amount, a lot more than Netflix, because I've noticed it's more about the quality than the quantity, because they have some really good movies over there, and they also, in the Warner Brothers library, as well as Turner Classic Movies. And on top of that, unlike Netflix, they don't have child porn on there.
Fair point. I also agree in general that HBO Max definitely... Because HBO in general has always been known more for its quality over quantity in general. And so this happening and being a better streaming service overall, aside from a few glitches I can have every once in a while with the boot up, that also happens with Amazon Prime. So if you're hearing this, HBO, maybe you want to look into that. But other than that, I agree. It's definitely quickly becoming my preferred go-to service for streaming. And also, while we're on the issue of the Snyder Cut, I believe it bears mentioning because there are a lot of grifting shitbag reviewers that were, oh, boo-hoo, poor, DC fanboys. It's never going to happen. Yeah, absolutely eat crap, you cretins. But also... we also need to point out the fact, because now I'm hearing a lot of them saying, the backlash for Restore the Snyderverse is exactly why Warner Brothers was worried about doing this in the first place. Woo! But basically, no, Warner Brothers never wanted to release this. You can thank AT&T for doing this. That needs to be hammered home, and I just wanted to use this time to point out that fact before we get started. Do not simp for Warner Brothers. This is AT&T's doing.
Yeah, I mean, enough people simp for the AT&T girl.
True.
Yeah, this whole release of Snyder Cut was truly a grassroots movement, unlike others that are funded by billion-dollar corporations. But anyways, so my question to you, Steven, is that how many sittings did you need for this movie? Because some people are not really used to sitting down watching like a 4 hour movie, and there were segments to let people know, like, okay, maybe a good time to pause the movie, go to the bathroom, get a refill on popcorn.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, because I have developed the internal organ structure of a divine creature from beyond the earth, I was able to sit through it in one sitting with no breaks. Also, shout out to my wonderful girlfriend Rachel. She was also able to sit through it in one sitting with me, which was she's a keeper. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, I was able to do it in one sitting. I have since rewatched particular parts. I don't think I've rewatched the whole thing multiple times yet, but I have seen the bulk of it at least 2 or 3 times at this point, but once full through. And I understand you were more than one sitting, is that correct?
Yeah, for me, what I did was I watched it in 2 parts. So the first half, was 2 hours, I watched it on a Friday night, and then I watched the second half on a Saturday night. So in a way, it was kind of like half and half. So I watched it up until roughly just after the tunnel sequence, and then I watched the rest of it in the second half of it. So that was just kind of like a part 1, part 2. This is what I kind of do when I watch the 10 Commandments around Easter. I usually watch the first half either in the early half of the day, and then I watch the part after it. After dinner, I watch the latter half of it, or maybe I watch it on a Saturday night and then watch the rest of it on a Sunday afternoon. But because I plan on seeing Godzilla vs. Kong on Saturday, I'm going to condense 10 Commandments into one day.
Gotcha. Yep.
But yeah, so what's interesting about this one is that although people did say that for some reason Wonder Woman 1984 had more viewership average numbers than this one, it's easy to point out and note that Zack Snyder's Justice League had more viewership than the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier over on Disney Plus, which is a Marvel Cinematic Universe show. And that says a lot because of the fact that Disney has far more subscribers than HBO Max does. So percentage-wise, it's a much larger viewership watching Zack Snyder's Justice League opposed to the Disney Plus streaming service for this MCU show. And it really does show how there's starting to become more fatigue now with the MCU, where people are starting to lose interest. They thought Endgame was kind of the nice, ending of it, and everything else seems kind of not worthwhile or that interesting. And also I noticed too, ever since this has been coming out, people have been reviewing both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, which is in the top 5 stream movies right now, last time I checked. And they're starting to get far more positive attention, which I love seeing that. So overall, people are kind of looking at the MCU as kind of just, as I've said before, the McDonald's of cinema.
Yeah, I would overall agree. I don't want to poop on the MCU too much because it did accomplish some remarkable feats especially leading up to Infinity War, I would say. Endgame had its moments too, but Infinity War, I would definitely say, takes the cake in that bag. But yeah, I've been saying, Tyler and I have both been saying that at some point, people are going to just have, to put it simply, superhero fatigue, but particularly MCU fatigue because of how generic copy and paste so much of it has been, with no real stakes until Infinity War, and even there, a lot of those stakes were undone to, basically only a couple of deaths really mattering in the whole stake of things. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, DC correctly, I think, is taking a polar opposite approach and not afraid to put their nuts on the table in the form of Zack Snyder. Now, when I say that, they are currently being Warner Brothers, the studio, trying to go in a new direction, which is why Restore the Snyderverse needs to, largely trend and keep being pushed. Because I think that we're coming up to, if we're not already in the moment where DC will have their chance to either, be on the same level with or surpass again Marvel, because for a long time, I mean, it was clear that DC was just the cinematic heavy hitter, up until about a decade ago when the MCU started to become a thing. And Tyler and I have been saying for a while that we think a time like this would come again. Just because of, how we see Marvel getting more stale and this being something different. And I'm glad to see that it's coming sooner than we might have expected. That's a really good thing to see.
Yeah, it's funny looking back at all of the arguments people had in the past that we were talking about how much we like Batman v Superman, and a lot of the, I don't want to, it's kind of just cliche to just label them as Marvel fanboys. Mm-hmm. We don't personally know them, but maybe we're not going to really name names here in this video particularly, but they were really, really going to bat for defending against the MCU and just hating on whatever they could on Batman v Superman in particular. But it's nice to know history has shown that people have looked back on something, and it has received the prequel effect, which of course we made a video a while back on a movie that was not very liked or successful upon its original release, but then give it time, and then people look back at it and say, that was better than I remember. I mean, prime examples of the Star Wars prequels, Hocus Pocus, John Carter, and also I would argue Van Helsing are movies that people have, now there's more positive attention for those movies than when they were originally released back in the day. And it's nice to see when people look at this say, let's try with something like this. So the next thing I want to talk about, of course, would have to be the major differences between this movie and that of of Justice League, as people jokingly call it, the director's cut and the theatrical cut. So the big difference, of course, let's talk about Steppenwolf. So Steppenwolf in Justice League is kind of a joke, like, where's my mother box? I'm entitled to this planet. Oh, this is a primitive weapon, but yet I'm holding an axe.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, he was kind of lame in that, just a punching bag for Superman at the end.
I think our friend Luke kept comparing him to what was it? No, not Melkor. The dark elf in Thor 2.
Oh, the Thor of the Dark World?
Yeah. And that's a great comparison. He was very just generic gray bad guy. That's really all there was to him.
Like in a lot of MCU villains in general.
Exactly.
Yeah, just disposable in that.
But imagine that, a Marvel director creating a gray generic villain. Who would have thought?
Coin toss, he's CGI. Yeah, overly two-dimensional in that. Now, again, we're not trying to overly dump on Marvel movies in general, because there are some really good Marvel movies outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, look at the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Yes, I even enjoy Spider-Man 3. And even, like, X-Men First Class, that's really good. And I would dare say that Punisher movie with John Travolta as a villain, that's an underrated movie. And I do have a soft spot for the Hulk movie with Eric Bana and Jennifer Connelly from the 2000s.
And there are even ones for me in the MCU that I think are pretty good. It's just when people start to say that, like, literally more of them are great than mediocre to bad, it's like you're not dealing with an adult at that point.
Yeah, come on, the Ant-Man movies.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3.
Mm-hmm. I would at least argue one Thor, maybe even two of them. But yeah, I digress. The point is that it's good to see, despite the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth of particular interests and a bunch of internet fanboys that wanted things to go one way, finally the trend is starting to normalize for, quality over quantity. And it's good to me to see that is happening. Better late than never. I wonder if COVID has had some element to do with that, where, not a lot of new film content is being produced. It's a lot of vlogs and podcasts and stuff like that. So people are just craving new stuff, and thus something like the Snyder Cut coming out of thin air onto a streaming service made everyone rethink, what they had previously just judged in passing, with their life in motion.
Oh yeah, and also the other major differences is that it makes a lot more sense what the mother boxes can do. It makes more sense why they wake up and not just by random in the theatrical cut, because they show that Superman's death cry in slow motion really echoes throughout the world and the whole universe to signal that, hey, Earth is ripe for the taking now. And there's also this really cool battle sequence where it's a much longer one when Wonder Woman's describing, and instead of Steppenwolf, it's Darkseid, who's in this movie. He was just name dropped in the theatrical cut, but he is in the Snyder cut. He looks really good, especially in the eyes as well.
I think for at least a solid 3-ish minutes he's in it. Yeah, but I would definitely say that if you were to put it simply, the three biggest benefits are it was darker, it was more fleshed out with more world building, and it also I guess you could put Darkseid in there too, because he really deserves his own point, and also quite frankly the heroes were more developed. It felt like even the people that got the short end, being Cyborg, he really was like a central figure for this cut of the movie. Mm-hmm. And Flash felt very important. He kind of ended up saving the day, despite, you can argue, the failure, if they did fail, would have been, on him. So basically, everyone was important. Everyone had their role. And it was just objectively, from a filmmaking standpoint, aside from maybe the people who say, okay, it could have been cut down in time. Sure, maybe a little. But it is clear that this is the superior cut overall of the film, without question.
Yeah, and also, so speaking of characters and that, I just really love what they did with, most of the scenes with Cyborg that we saw in the theatrical cut, that was all reshoot stuff, which explains why the actor who's playing him seemed a lot more stiff. I remember I watched our review we had of that movie from several years ago, and I brought up how I know that sounds kind of redundant and kind of a little bit too obvious that he acted a bit too robotic in that, but
yeah.
But watching this movie, it really occurred to me his acting was way better in this movie, but under Joss Whedon's direction, or lack thereof direction, he just was a lot more stiff and not as full of life as he could have been. And especially Flash, too. He just wasn't just dropping jokes. You emotionally connected more with him in this movie, especially what he does in the third act, which I won't spoil. But yes...
just real quick, it speaks volumes to me that the actor for Cyborg is actively part of the Restore the Snyderverse campaign. That definitely, speaks volumes from the cast that one of the main actors is significantly leaning in favor of one direction over the other, even if it might be against his financial interest. So that's just another point I wanted to add.
Oh yeah, and I think I remember, I read somewhere, but I have to confirm this, but there's at least a rumor that Ben Affleck also was part of this, where on Twitter he also expressed interest to release the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League as well.
I hadn't heard that, but I would believe it, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Jason Momoa confirmed that the Snyder cut does exist, even before they decided that, we're going to release a Snyder cut in that, when they officially announced they were going to do that. But I will say the biggest difference between this movie and the theatrical cut is there is no mustache removal from Superman.
Yes. Thank God. That was... Whew.
Looking like Angry Orange right there.
Yeah. No, it was weird because on the initial viewing of the movie, I remember in theaters, I didn't notice it terribly. But then in retrospect, after the fact and seeing the movie again, I definitely noticed it right away. So it's if you're more informed about these things, it can be both a gift and a curse. But I think a lot of people may have just noticed it in the first place, and that it's a good thing that was gotten rid of.
Oh yeah, I accidentally mispronounced a character's a fictional character's name. I accidentally called him the Angry Orange. It's actually the Annoying Orange.
Oh,
Because of the whole mustache removal thing, it looked like the Annoying Orange with like the mouth on there and talking like. Or remember that Incredibles cartoon like spoof thing that Mr. Incredible and Frozone had a commentary on, and their animation was like the mouse for real, but the animation was like stiff and that.
right.
It reminded me of the Superman mustache removal. And yeah, there's none of that sort of deal.
How about the "yes, ma'am" smile? That you can see his gums, and it's like a completely different mouth.
Yeah, there's no Russian family that needs to be saved. And, oh yeah, but one thing I want to talk about the actor who plays Superman, that sort of thing. So, there's a movie he was in this year, too, called Enola Holmes on Netflix. It was with Millie Bobby Brown. And watching the movie, on the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, knowing Henry Cavill's, or Cavill, however you pronounce his last name, of his dating preferences and that sort of thing. He kind of likes to date like kind of close to the border, if you know what I mean.
Wait, do you mean the U.S. border or the age border?
The age one.
Okay, I was gonna say like. I mean, I could understand foreign girls, you know.
That's not what I meant. I could have worded that better. Close to the legal limit.
Yikes! Big yikes! Yeah.
So with the lead actress of that movie, part of me was thinking to myself, I wonder if she had, various spies on the set to make sure nothing was happening with, him exactly, because of her experiences with Drake, if you know what I mean.
Sounds like she needed Mark Wahlberg, because apparently I remember hearing on the set for Transformers 5, he was like constantly daddying Isabella Moner because people were ogling her over, her basically being some little pop star. And he was like, hey, you keep your hands off, this girl's a minor. So it sounds like she needed some of that, parental oversight herself. Goodness.
Yeah, people jokingly said that half of Mark Wahlberg's movie is like, hey man, hey, you mess with my family. I'm gonna throw you across the room now.
What's going on? I don't understand. I'm from Brooklyn.
Yeah, some people were jokingly saying it'd be funny if you expect him to throw someone across the room, but then the joke turns out he's the one to get thrown across the room.
Yeah. The Happening too.
What? No. Overreacting to fake plants. You thought Batman Robin was bad at that, but
when Poison Ivy just gets lazy.
That was better than The Happening. Yeah, that whole movie is a guilty pleasure. But anyway, do you know what's one thing that this movie and Joss Whedon Justice League has in common?
What's that?
They both got the upskirt shot of Wonder Woman.
Ayo. Also, another thing they have in common, there was one joke I wanted them to keep in both versions, and they did. So what's your superpower? I'm rich. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was good. But yeah, I remember when we saw the director's cut in theaters, and that part with everyone's coming out of that transport thing or whatever and jumping down, and we see like up the skirt of Gal Gadot, and I think we might have saw her butt crack, and we looked at each other like, did you just see that? I remember, Steven, you got a girlfriend now.
Yes, I have to behave. Censored for the deer.
Yeah, so anyway, so jumping over to Flash's character, I did like that moment where he get introduced to Flash for the first time was better than just cutting it out, just jump into this whole joke thing about doodling on some guy in line. I liked how he's at this pet store and he sees this one girl that he's into, And then there's this car crash, and he runs to save her, and he kind of like, falls more in love with her. But during that moment, I kind of had to restrain myself from laughing pretty hard because I was watching it with my parents and that, because they would probably be confused while I was laughing. Because during that part, there's also a hot dog stand that's ran over, and there's a bunch of hot dogs and buns flying up. I'm like, this is one of the most Freudian allegories I've ever seen in a movie.
Right, and he was sensually touching her and everything just to add with them in the background. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, DC is not a stranger to Freudian symbolism. I don't know if you remember that episode of Batman the Animated Series. People have been pointing this out for many years now. In the episode Pretty Poison, in the third act, Batman is fighting this plant monster by Poison Ivy, and people have noticed that this plant monster that's like a Venus flytrap, people say it's kind of like a Freudian yonic symbol, which is the opposite of phallic symbol in that.
I see.
And even like Bruce Timm, when he was like designing the plant, monster thing, because he didn't like how the other designers were making it look like Little Shop of Horrors and that, like the plant from that. Mm-hmm. He was designing it, then he realized, oh yeah, this looks like something very Freudian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And anyways, so, and this is kind of spoiler territory here, so I really was blown away by the part when Flash was able to reverse time and kind of go into the Speed Force there. So it was nice to see it was a twist where we saw them lose for a moment, but Flash pulled through and saved everybody, which was really nice to see. But I think if Ezra Miller had the ability to turn back time, he would go back in time and stop himself from choking out that woman.
Yeah. I think if I had to narrow down some of my absolute favorite improvements, and this is heavily spoiler territory, so alert, skip to the following time if you don't want to be spoiled. But I think some of my favorite changes were basically the anti-life equation being involved in this. That was good. That was very necessary to have Darkseid and Steppenwolf be important to this. Speak of the devil, Darkseid, he was also a tremendous add-on to this to kind of hit home the significance, and I would even argue to a certain extent outdo the original Avengers in terms of like screen time for Thanos versus Darkseid, Thanos at the end of the Avengers was there for all of maybe a minute, probably not even, as kind of a little hint. And Darkseid, you could tell, definitely was like a prominent player in this. He was just not physically there. He was invested from afar. And that was good. But like I mentioned, the heroes and their development, also the Barry's contribution, and the nightmare sequences. Those are always a treat for me, and I really hope we at least get a part 2 to the Snyderverse for that in particular, because the storyboards of the plans, which I'm sure will have to be changed a little now, have very shocking implications that could really do a lot for DC. I don't want to spoil them here. You can look them up for yourself if you want, because they are available on Google Images. But they set things up very well so that they could go a couple of ways and still use different directors for standalone movies. But in the context of Justice League, I think it's got to be handed off to Snyder for what he's proved here.
Yes, definitely. And also, I mean, speaking of, wanting to go back in time and reverse something and stop from happening, I think Gal Gadot would probably want to go back in time and stop herself from that celebrity sing compilation that they did a year ago.
Fair point.
Yeah, that did not go well whatsoever. Yikes. But yes, but one last thing I want to talk about with the big difference is, of course, that of Jared Leto as the Joker is in this one, and that was all reshoots, that part of the $70 million that they spent that happened recently, And overall, I thought he was okay. I mean, he's better than what it was in Suicide Squad. I felt like Jared Leto kind of could stick with what he was doing. He wasn't just like overly experimenting like he was on screen, and he didn't have that stupid damage tattoo on his head.
Mm-hmm.
They ditched that and like good. But overall, I mean, I feel like it could have been better of a performance in a way, and I think what didn't help too was that the camera angling and kind of the sun kept shining in the face of Jared Leto's character. It was overly distracting to me how that was, that set was shot, how that setup was when they shot that. But what did you think of the Joker in this one?
I overall agree. I think that it was definitely a slight step up from Suicide Squad, but he was mediocre. He's definitely, of the new Jokers we've had in the past decade and a half, he's been probably the most disappointing overall. And the only way I could see this turning out where I go, you know what, I respect this still, is if it turns out as they develop this narrative, and just to be clear, I don't think they're going to do this, but the plausible deniability in the narrative and the room is there for them to do this. Excuse me. But basically, there's been implications and a theory that people have been saying that what if it turns out the real Joker is either dead or off screen this whole time, and basically Robin is the Joker that we're seeing that is being portrayed by Jared Leto because he looks so much younger than Ben Affleck that it just doesn't really add up that this would be Ben Affleck's Joker. If anyone, it should be someone in the age range of like, I don't know, at least Ben Affleck's age or maybe like a Willem Dafoe type. Someone older, because this is supposed to be a more battle-hardened and damaged Batman. So to have a young Joker doesn't make a whole lot of sense, no matter how you do it. So if they added that into the narrative and somehow revealed that, despite us thinking that, again, spoiler, Robin being dead, it could be that they're saying he's dead metaphorically, that basically in Batman's failure, he let the Robin he knows dies and become like the Joker instead as an ultimate, middle finger to Batman as his biggest joke on him. I think that would be a very cool twist, but I don't see that happening. So if this is the Joker we have, it's mediocre.
Okay, so on the final note, go on before we get our review of the movie, is that ever since this has happened, there's been talks about releasing director's cuts of other movies, such as David R. Suicide Squad, because I heard that there were some major differences to that one, such as Enchantress's design being much different, the Diablo character not getting killed off at the end, and Katana getting possessed at one point and attacking the members of the Suicide Squad. Also, Josh Trank's Fantastic Four movie, which I've heard is a much darker but better movie, according to the actor who played Doctor Doom in that movie. And even some Star Wars stuff, like Lord and Miller's Solo: A Star Wars Story. The guys who made the 21 Jump Street movies, they were working on the Solo movie, but then they were fired halfway through production, and then Ron Howard came in and finished the movie and reshot a bunch of it. And also Rogue One, which was directed by, I just forgot the guy's name, and then some other guy came in and reshot other stuff. But of all those movies, what would you like to see the most of a director's cut?
Honestly, of the ones you mentioned, I would probably be most curious about Fantastic Four, because that one really ended up being very mediocre. And from what they were doing with Doctor Doom, especially, I would have been very curious to see how that would be improved with a dark twist. Also, not to plug completely, but as a active member of the Transformers community, I have a YouTube friend named Aleximus Primus, who will be doing a recut of Transformers: The Last Night, So while not being a actual release by Paramount or something, following this trend, there are people all over the place that are like, yeah, screw it, let's do a director's cut, and I really respect that.
Yeah, that whole movie feels like a Frankenstein creation because the first half I've heard that's a lot of Josh Trank's movie, but the second half is very much the studio's flick. I mean, just look at Kate Mara's hair. I mean, it goes back and forth between being her real natural hair. Well, she dyed it blonde for the movie, her natural long hair, and then it is an obvious wig in various other shots.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's like facial hair on Miles Teller who plays Mr. Fantastic in the movie. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there. And yeah, I mean, I would have liked to seen, of course, the director's cut of basically all these movies in general, but I don't know if we're going to see anything Disney related because I don't think Disney wants to admit that they make a mistake when it comes to certain movies.
That's a very valid point.
Because the movie, what was that called? Oh yeah, The Black Cauldron. That movie, I heard that they cut a lot of stuff out of that because they would have gotten an R rating if they would have shown too much mature content.
Mm-hmm.
And I would actually really like to see like a director's cut or an uncut version of The Black Cauldron if they would go back and restore the various things that they cut and at least finish the animation and release that. Would be very interesting to see that.
Yeah.
In fact, that one movie I was mentioning with Sarah White when I interviewed her, aside from when her time during the reshoots of Justice League, and also she went to go see the premiere of The Nutcracker in the Four Realms. From what I've heard with that movie, that they spent more than 3 days reshooting the movie. The original director of the movie, I'm trying to remember his name, but he was busy directing another movie called A Dog's Purpose. And they got this other guy named Joe Johnston to come in. He directed movies like Jumanji, The Rocketeer, Captain America: The First Avenger, and ironically, the Wolfman remake. And he came in to reshoot more than 30 days of filming, and it's kind of obvious because the lead actress of the movie, she was 15, 16 when they were filming that, but then when she was called back for reshoots, she was 17, so in some shots in that movie, she does look a little bit more mature in the face at times, and then there's a shot in the trailer where she's doing a dramatic turnaround, and it's not in the movie whatsoever. She does look much younger, and also it's not a deleted scene either, so there has to be some kind of original director's cut of this movie, at least of the original director of that one. So I'd be sort of interested to see what that movie was like. At least it probably would have not been as much of a hot mess as it turned out to be. But out of all those movies, I should have mentioned this before, one movie we would love to see a director's cut on is Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes, yeah. That one didn't even come to my mind because I thought director dead, so never gonna happen. But absolutely, I think that that overall number one of all time for me would be the one I want to see, just because of the sheer amount and where in particular in that story it was supposed to have been cut, and the implications for like his real experiences and what might have been shown that is like hinting towards something nefarious happening in real elite circles in our society. Yikes. That could have been a real game changer.
Yeah, and also, what are your thoughts on that other Disney movie I was mentioning, that Nutcracker one?
Honestly, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment too heavily on it, but I heard from a variety of people that I trust on it that it just was kind of underwhelming overall. So I'm sure it could probably use an extended cut if it had one, for at least the benefit of the doubt. For that matter, Suicide Squad as well, because of the whole controversy of literally the trailer companies being allowed to cut a lot of it towards the very end, and that's what led to the film that we got. So yeah, that's what I'd say about it.
Yeah, I think the one I want to see the most, aside from Eyes Wide Shut, would be the Fantastic Four movie by Josh Trank, just to see like how this movie could have been better, because it's so much of a mess up that happened. So no one got the movie what they wanted. The studio didn't get the movie they wanted. The director didn't get the movie he wanted. And of course, he disowned the movie on opening weekend on his Twitter. and that, so...
And the fans didn't either. That's important to add. Like, that wasn't said, but that's a pretty big elephant.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. I would love to see these ones. And my personal favorite director's cut of a movie that really does improve upon a movie will probably have to be the movie Troy from 2004 with Brad Pitt. Because it's much longer movie, but things make a lot more sense character-wise. There's more screen time for specific characters, especially Rose Byrne's character, who's a love interest to Achilles in the movie. And there's a much more graphic sacking of Troy that feels a lot more more violent. Like, it's rated R, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's very brutal and hard to watch at times. But anyways, so what did you think of Zack Snyder's Justice League?
I thought it was phenomenal, and if not the best, in the top 2 of the DCEU in its entirety so far. A great capstone and a great... I'm forgetting the term... basically, the pinnacle of Snyder's work for the DCEU. A lot of improvements. A few things that, mainly in terms of pacing, people could argue for the sake of runtime could have been changed. But overall, improvements in scoring, improvements in acting, improvements in world building. Overall, a great film experience that you owe it to yourself to see if you like DC, dark superhero movies, or Snyder's films in general. I would definitely recommend going to the bathroom before you do so, because it's going to be a while if you're going to do it in one sitting. But absolutely worth it. And if I had to give this a score, I would put it somewhere between 86 and 87%.
Okay. Well, personally, I think this is definitely a pretty solid movie. Most definitely an improvement over Joss Whedon's Justice League. I mean, there's a big difference why people have nothing but positive things to say about Zack Snyder as a person and why people are slowly turning on Joss Whedon by the day. I mean, back in the day, I kind of said that Joss Whedon is not as great as people make him out to be when I was reviewing Alien Resurrection. True. And this is the kind of guy who, on Twitter, I'm not part of the whole cancel culture thing, but this guy did something really odd and questionable by wanting someone to get raped by a rhino on Twitter, which he deleted his tweet about, but still, what gives, man? And also, this guy claims to be, a feminist and that, but his ex-wife's like, yeah, that's a bunch of BS. And Gal Gadot has also been talked about how he was a bit pervy and that sort of thing. So there's two types of people to not trust in this world, people: politicians and male feminists.
Watch out there, Tyler. You may get flagged by Disney.
Yeah. But hey, prove me wrong. Alright, so back on track. So also on top of that, the soundtrack was much better than what the theatrical cut was, because Danny Elfman did the soundtrack, and it was pretty generic from what I remember, or at least what I'm trying to remember from that soundtrack, which is kind of generic MCU stuff, which you would typically hear with that shared universe.
Yeah.
And while the movie can be a little bit long at times, and I definitely prefer Batman v Superman over this one,
Agreed.
And kind of Man of Steel, but I strongly believe that Watchmen will probably go down as Zack Snyder's best movie, and I would say this is up there with 300. Both are solid movies.
Yeah.
So overall, I would give Zack Snyder's Justice League 3 stars out of 4. Pretty solid movie. Definitely better than the previous movie I watched on HBO Max, which was Tom and Jerry, which was an okay movie. Speaking of, I don't know if you heard about this, Steven, but days before Zack Snyder's Justice League premiered, someone was trying to stream Tom and Jerry on HBO Max, and they accidentally started playing Zack Snyder's Justice League.
I did hear about that, and I was so pressed. I was so aggravated that I missed it by an hour. I missed it by an hour doing work. So
yeah, I was at work too when that happened, and that. But I thought that was a pretty funny mess up. It reminds me of many years ago. Well, not that long ago, but more than 5 years ago, some movie theater was supposed to play the movie Inside Out by Disney Pixar, but they accidentally started playing Insidious Chapter 3.
Yeah, that's a That'll turn your insides out if you're a kid, that's for sure.
Yeah, I thought the movie was okay. The director of that movie, Lee Winhell, would direct much better movies like Upgrade and The Invisible Man.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
All right, so anyway, this is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Stephen Lawson from Stephen Lawson on Facebook, YouTube, and all the above.
All right, and we hope to make a lot more in the future. This review is as long as the movie itself. Please like and subscribe.